What is up, Janksters? It's your boy Graham, also known as HamHox42 on the internet, and in today's edition of the Overthinking MTG podcast, I wanted to do a deeper dive on battles. Now, at this point, we've had about a week or so to really get into playing some of this new card type, and really just kind of ask the question, are they any good? And to be honest, I think they are. So to give you kind of my impression on them, I believe that battles actually add an interesting element to the game, and I believe the design was actually pretty solid. Like, none of them feel overpowered. None of them feel, at least I don't have the feeling when a certain battle hits the field, oh no, here we go again, which is usually an indicator that, okay, maybe a card's pushed a little too hard. So I don't find that happening with battles specifically. And there's some where the front face, that ETB is very strong, and that's good enough, and the backside may never happen, and that's okay. And there are others where the moment they hit the battlefield, the opponent gets some kind of benefit, and then immediately I find myself thinking, oh man, they better not flip that. And the fact that those two experiences differ are really kind of cool. And so I think they're really neat design space, and I think they're an overall positive for the game. And I hope to see more future sieges as well as other battle types moving forward. So what I wanted to do today in this video, in addition to giving you kind of an overview of my feelings on battles themselves, is to also go through each color and look at the best battle for each color. And then I'm also going to do one for multicolor. Now, multicolor was easily the toughest one to pick because I feel like a ton of battles in multicolor are really darn good. A lot of them, depending on what kind of deck you're running and depending on what you're doing. Like Invasion of Amonkhet, Invasion of the Rakdos one, the Asgol, those are really solid for what they do. So if that's what you're interested in, those cards are actually really strong. But I gotta give the edge to one that I think is possibly the strongest battle in the entire set, believe it or not. And the reason that it's especially unbelievable is because it's actually an uncommon, and that is the Invasion of Urgamon. I think Urgamon is nothing short of excellent. I think this card's fantastic. It's a 5 defense battle for red and a green. When it ETBs, create a treasure token, then you may discard a card if you do draw a card. So there are a lot of 3, 4, or even 5 color value piles out there in various formats, especially standard, which is what I've been playing the most of myself. And the ability to spend a 2-drop, get a treasure token, which is going to ramp you and help fix your mana for some of those, 4 and 5 drop spells, and then also smooth out your hand and load your graveyard with a potential reanimator threat for later. I mean, this card does all the things that I like to see. So if I can get an Invasion of Urgamon on 2 into a Fable of the Mirror Breaker on 3, world is my oyster. I get to hand just curate my graveyard and then establish some excellent board presence and ramp into some really powerful stuff later. Like, Invasion of Urgamon gives me Fable of the Mirror Breaker vibes. Just it's smaller, like you get much less than you get with Fable, but it also only costs 2, but it is across 2 colors. So again, I feel like it's balanced, but in that kind of situation, it's really, really good. But the backside is also excellent. So on the backside, you get Truga Cliff Charger. So this is a rhino, which that's a great creature type. Who doesn't love rhinos? And it's a 3/4 trampler, which the body's nothing to sneeze at, seeing as it only required a mana investment of 2. Granted, it has 5 defense, so it is tough to flip. But if you pull it off, here you go. When Truga Cliff Charger enters the battlefield, you may discard a card. If you do, search your library for a land or a battle card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. So again, we have a situation where it's going to help you fix your mana if that's what you need. It's also, note, it's any land. That doesn't say basic. So if you have a really bomb utility land that is going to help you bring the ending of the game, this can help you go find it. Additionally, if you have other battles, and one of the nice things about there being so many battles, I think there were 30... I want to say 36. But we have more than 30 battles to choose from, all of which behave very differently from one another. So whatever your deck is trying to do, there's probably a battle that helps you do it that this guy can go find. And again, if we have the Fable of the Mirror Breaker in play, this is a non-legendary creature with a strong ETB. So if you are able to copy this, you can go grab a different battle. So if you have a lot of different battles going on, and you can cheese these out, not the least of which, by the way, there is another multicolor battle that is the Orzhov battle that actually allows you to reanimate things. So the front of this helps you load your graveyard. The backside can go find that battle and you can reanimate the thing. Seems good to me. So if you have a way to flip this, that the lines, the sequence that you can set up are really just freaking good. So yeah, I think Invasion of Urgamon is possibly the best one we have yet. I know I've talked about it on the show before. I love this card. I think it's absolutely fantastic. So for the other colors, we're going to start at white, and we're going to go around in color pie order, ending on green. So let's get into it. So for the white card, the white battle that I think is the best battle for mono white is the Invasion of Gobakhan. This is a really solid ability. It has the ETB, so it's for 1 and a white. It's only 3 defense. When Invasion of Gobakhan enters the battlefield, look at target opponent's hand. You may exile a non-land card from it. For as long as that card remains exiled, its owner may play it. A spell cast this way costs 2 more to cast. So if you... So there's some interesting things you can do here. This is the Elite Spellbinder ability, is effectively what you're doing. You're choosing a card in their hand, and you are taxing it by 2. And you're also pulling it off to the side. You're putting it into exile rather than leaving it in their hand. That is especially notable because if they have a card with cycling or channel, all of a sudden it's no longer in their hand. They can't use it. The other thing that this effect, as a reanimator player myself, this effect is especially nasty because if your opponent is able to hit your hand at a time when you still have like an uncastable Atraxa or like an Atali sitting in your hand that you want to get into your graveyard to reanimate later, if they tax it with this, all of a sudden you can't put it into your graveyard anymore. It's now in exile. You can't discard it. And so that's a really powerful way to cut your opponent off from any of those effects. Additionally, this kind of effect is great if you are establishing a board presence and are pushing your opponent. If you have a clock, if you are being aggressive, being able to hit their hand and pull a board wipe away from them. If they have like a Brotherhood's End, for example, like let's say you hit turn 1, powerful threat, turn 2, powerful threat, like a Hopeful Initiate into a Thalia or something, with Thalia already knocks them off this as well, and you're just punching face. You're just bam, bam, bam. Then once you hit turn 3 or 4, if you're worried about what they have in their hand, you can throw Invasion of Gobakhan. If they have a 3 or 4 mana board wipe, like a Brotherhood's End or a Depopulate, which Thalia might already be taxing them, but if that's in their hand, you can then add an additional 2 mana to it, and I mean, that makes it so that it's 2 turns farther away in most situations, and that's usually enough for you to end the game before they get to their board wipe. You know, we've all seen that moment where our aggressive opponent is overrunning us, and it's like, okay, if I can get this board wipe off, I'm going to be fine. And in the past, it's been Elite Spellbinder that drops on the field. It's like, nope, that board wipe's off the table, dog. And it's like, well, I guess I just die then. Now, in the case of Elite Spellbinder, it's also putting 3 power in the air. This does not have that. And on top of that, you may want to flip this. And if you do flip this, that's 3 damage that goes towards this battle that did not go towards your opponent's face, which can be problematic. You know, that is definitely an issue. So we have the question of, okay, what do you get, and is it worth that? Well, on the backside, you get the Light Shield Array. This is an enchantment that says at the beginning of your end step, you put a +1/+1 counter on each creature that attacked this turn. And you can sacrifice Light Shield Array. Creatures you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. So this is kind of a limited heroic intervention, just locked and loaded, ready to go. That's actually pretty fantastic. So if you're worried about the board wipe, you can tax the board wipe. If you have 3 1/1s lying around, you send all of them at the Invasion of Gobakhan. It flips on your end step. You put a +1/+1 counter on all of them, not to mention anybody else that attacked this turn. And then you have this heroic intervention like ready to go. So when they do finally get to their board wipe, assuming it's a destroy board wipe, all of a sudden it doesn't matter, or damage based. Then all of a sudden your guys are still fine. Like, that's really good. Like, this effect is really solid, and it's only a 2 mana investment, and you only need to redirect 3 damage. So very easy to play, very easy to flip, and it's pretty solid. That said, all you're doing is delaying your opponent here. That's all you're doing. You're just slowing them down. So be aware of that. I would highly recommend running this with some kind of creature strategy, like some kind of tempo game plan where you're trying to put your opponent on a clock and trying to just knock them off of their game plan just enough, like knock them off their mana curve just enough so that you can kill them before they have an opportunity to pop. Like the current Esper deck is a decent fit for this, I think, because you have a lot of really low cost legends that are just going to be bashing in and really causing havoc. And so flipping it's easy. The backside is valuable in that kind of a scenario, and again, you get to tax your opponent's removal, making it very difficult for them to cast it. So, all in all, just good. All right, so next up is blue, and this is one, I did a full episode on this card, so I'm not going to go too deep on it here. Invasion of Segovia. I've had a chance to play with it. It is better than I anticipated. Like, when I did the full episode on it, I did it mostly on the flavor and, like, what is Segovia. But in this case, let's take a look mechanically. It creates the 2/1/1 Krakens for 3 mana, which, I mean, 2 1/1s for 3, not really great, but notably, this does give you the tools you need to help flip it, which a lot of battles don't do, so that's pretty cool. So it gives you a creature it gives you 2 creatures that could theoretically attack into this. Granted, it's 2 1/1 showing up on turn 3. They're probably not gonna have like a free shot at it, so you got to do some shenanigans, some removal and whatnot to make that happen. But still, and then the backside is Kaites, Sea Tyrant of Segovia, which basically gives all your non-creature. Well, it does literally give all your non-creature spells convoke. This is and it untaps 4 of your creatures on end step. So Kaites, Sea Tyrant of Segovia is fantastic. Like just straight up fantastic. Now the one notable thing here is the Invasion of Segovia. It's not great in multiples because the backside is legendary. So if you have, it's weird. It's almost good in multiples because if you have multiple of the front face down, you presumably got a bunch of Krakens. Cool. And each one of those is a Kaites on layaway. So you don't have to flip them. In fact, there are many situations in which you shouldn't because, if you have a way to check your opponent's hand, like the Invasion of Govicon we just looked at, and you know there's a board wipe coming, don't attack into this. Just let it sit there. Make them wipe the board before you flip Kaites, and then find another way to flip it and get Kaites online and start doing stuff. Like, after you rebuild, bring him out. But in the meantime, let him chill because board wipes right now don't hit battles. At least very few of them. There's Into the Fire, but that card is not great. Anyway, but all in all, Invasion of Segovia is way better than I thought. And if you can get Kaites online, all of a sudden, like, you have counter spells open, you have, like, board wipes open in ways that you just didn't before. Like, you can throw more battles post-combat in way, like, it's great. Like, this card's awesome. It plays better than I expected. It's easily an overperformer. All right, so next up we have black, and that is, we're going to be looking at the Invasion of Fiora. Now, black has a handful of board wipes that are actually pretty darn solid. No, sorry, not board wipes. No, actually, they're hurting for board wipes, which is what makes this so good. Black right now has a number of battles. Like, a lot of the black battles are really good, if I'm honest. They have another one that has Flash, which is, like, shockingly good. I believe it's Innistrad. Like, the play pattern on that, the sequence that you can do for that one is great. Don't get me wrong. But this, in your mid-rangey decks, or in more mid-ranging decks or more controlling decks, this card is just strictly excellent. The Invasion of Fiora, when it enters the battlefield, choose one or both. Destroy all legendary creatures or destroy all non-legendary creatures. So if your deck is built around legends, primarily, there are scenarios where this is going to be a one-sided board wipe. Now, that said, a lot of legendary creatures are the good playable ones these days, so chances are your opponent's going to have some number of those, but if they do, and it is advantageous for you, you can blow up the world and both players just lose all their creatures. And you have a 4 defense battle down. I think the fact that this battle is also only 4 defense is really relevant, because flipping this is not going to be particularly hard. I don't think, anyway. And on the backside, you get Marchesa, Resolute Monarch. So this is a 3/6 Menace Death Toucher, which is a sweet keyword combo in my opinion. Whenever Marchesa Resolute Monarch attacks, remove all counters from up to 1 target permanent. And at the beginning of your end step, if you haven't been dealt combat damage since your last turn, you draw a card and lose 1 life. This is something of a reference to the Monarch, which was an ability, or which was a token. No, it's not a token. It kind of behaves like an emblem, now that I think about it, but it's a status that a player can embody, and it's very popular in Commander, where the Monarch at their end step draws an additional card. That's all they do, and the way that you become the Monarch is you deal combat damage to the reigning Monarch successfully. And so, in this case, Marchesa basically says, like, you don't get the Monarch. It doesn't, like, add that to the game, which I kind of wish it did, because that'd just be fun. But what it does say is basically, in this situation, it checks on your upkeep rather than your end step, which is relevant. But you lose the life. It's a draw card, lose a life. Unlike the Monarch, which is just draw the card. So it's, I don't know, it's more like a Phyrexian Arena if you've managed to defend your face, which I don't know. It's an interesting mechanic. It's an interesting idea. I like it. I think it's cool. Yeah. And whenever she attacks, removing all the counters from one target permanent could be incredibly powerful. And because it doesn't specify what kind of counter. So if you have battles, this is just an insta flip. You just freely flip your battles. If you don't have battles, but your opponent has planeswalkers, this just freely kills a planeswalker upon attack. Like, so you don't even need to be committing to attacking the planeswalker. You attack face and like, oh, by the way, get that out of here. Like, very much like a monarch just like dismissing someone out of hand, which I kind of flavorfully, I like the idea of Marchesa just like shooing away a planeswalker. I kind of love that. So it's a very powerful card if you can get it to flip. And on the front face, if you're getting beaten down and you get to 6 mana, it's going to keep you around, which is pretty awesome. So all in all, I think this card's great. Now note, on the front face, it says, when it enters the battlefield, choose one or both. Destroy all legends and non-legendaries. It does not say choose any number. And the reason that that is significant is you have to select at least one of these options. You cannot choose neither. If it said choose up to any number, you would say, well, I choose 0 and I just don't take one. And in that case, you'd be able to stick Invasion of Fiora without killing anything on the board. And if you're ahead on board, that would then give you the opportunity to flip Marchesa very easily. But in this case, you have to kind of build your deck with that in mind and have either heavy legends or heavy non-legends. That way you can, throw it down and, you may still have to lose some stuff, but you have to lose some stuff. This has to wipe something when it hits. But all in all, pretty solid card. I like it a lot. I think in controlling decks, this could be excellent because the backside gives you card advantage and a threat that can tangle in combat. The fact that she has 3 power and then menace and death touch means that if your opponent's block and 6 toughness, so she's going to survive a lot of these tussles too. But if your opponent double blocks her with anything, unless they have protection from black or indestructible or enough first strike to kill her, this is just going to take them out. You're going to kill 2 things most combat, or your opponent's just going to take Marchesa to the face, which granted, she's only 3 power. So hitting your opponent for 3 doesn't really feel too bad. But even so, she attacks really well and she blocks really well because of that 6 toughness. So I don't know. I like this card a lot. I think Marchesa is very powerful and a really good payoff to the Invasion of Fiora if you can drop it, wipe it, and flip it. So yeah, just good. I just like this card a lot. All right, so next up we have red, and I don't think this is going to come as a surprise to anybody. The red card is, it's the Invasion of Tarkir. This card rules. When you're first looking at it, it's a sorcery speed shock that maybe is a sorcery speed lightning strike, if I'm lucky. And it's why would I not just run Obliterating Bolt in any of my decks? Why in the world would I run this? Well, the truth is, the front face is 2 mana removal. In many situations, you can remove your opponent's early creatures. And if they don't have a creature, you can just punch them in the face. So yeah. So anyway, let me get into it. So when Invasion of Tarkir enters the battlefield, reveal any number of dragon cards from your hand. When you do, Invasion of Tarkir deals X plus 2 damage to any other target, where X is the number of cards revealed this way. So it drops, it deals damage. Now, it can't hit itself, unfortunately, because that would be way too powerful. Because in that case, if you had 3 dragons in your hand, it's just I'm just going to play this and flip it, immediately. And that would be busted because the backside is worth way more than 2 mana. So yeah, so the front face is just good removal. If your opponent plays a good one, a good 2-drop, this is probably going to take it out in many situations. So cool. It gives you a little bit of advantage on board, and it also establishes this 5 toughness battle, which is not hard to flip, by the way. Especially in red, where there's a lot of direct burn that can hit any target. There are also a couple of pieces of burn in this set that allow you to target battles specifically. They can't go face, but they can hit battles. And in those cases, that's great. And on the backside, you get the Defiant Thundermaw. This is a 4/4 dragon with flying and trample. Whenever a dragon you control attacks, it deals 2 damage to any target. If you have multiple, that's the other thing. In any deck that wants this card, you want 4. Immediately. Don't even consider it, just put them in. If you have enough dragons to make the front face more powerful, and if you have if you have multiple dragons swinging with this on the field, you're able to just deal out shocks to whatever you want, which is going to either devastate your opponent's board, flip a bunch more battles that you have lying around, or just kill your opponent. That's the funny thing too, with creatures, planeswalkers, and battles now, being able to direct damage to anything, there's a lot of stuff to choose from. And so you need to balance how much damage am I sending at battles versus how much damage am I sending my opponent's face. And in the case of Tarkir, the backside of the battle, this creature gives you way more damage. So investing 4 damage up front to just flip this thing, 5. Investing 5 damage up front to flip this thing, if the Defiant Thundermaw attacks once, even if you have no other dragons on the field, it deals 6. So if you get to untap with this, you've already gotten your money back, so to speak. And if you have other dragons down, this is going to add just that much more damage. So, holy cow, this thing's great. I have had it on the field where I've had 2 of these alongside like Shivan Devastators and a Maniform Hellkite. If you can do that, oh boy howdy, you will be able to blow up all of your battles, their entire board, and their life total on a single swing. In a lot of cases, it is wild the amount of damage this thing can put out. So it's great. Yeah. So Invasion of Tarkir is a mythic, and I believe it deserves a mythic. The comparison that this card gets a lot is Bonecrusher Giant, because it's like a bad burn spell. Because it is. Like, you know, if you just gave me the front face and the back face wasn't a factor, this card would be terrible. Even at common, it would be like the kind of thing you pick up at like the 6th or 7th pick in a draft and be like, it's fine, I guess. If I have to play it, I will. But the backside of it makes this whole thing worth it. And this card becomes fantastic. And the reason people compare it to Bonecrusher Giant is because Stomp, the 2 damage shock from Bonecrusher Giant, is not great. Like, it's not a great spell, really. Like, 2 damage can't be prevented for 2. Granted, it's an instant speed. But, like, if that was alone as its own card, it wouldn't see any play. But the fact that it comes stapled onto this 4/3 for 3 that hits your opponent if they target it, like, it's amazing. Like, you know, the Stomp is icing because the Bonecrusher Giant is so freaking good. And to be abundantly clear, I want to go on record. Invasion of Tarkir is nowhere near as good as Bonecrusher Giant. But the fact that, like, the captain of your high school track and field team wasn't as good as Usain Bolt in the 100-meter dash isn't really a fair comparison now, is it? So, like, yeah, Bonecrusher Giant is an incredibly stupid, busted card. Invasion of Tarkir is a very good card. The fact that it invites that comparison is already enough of a recommendation, in my opinion. I think this card's great. I love it a lot. All right, so finally, we're going to be looking at green. So the green battle that I believe is the best battle that we have is the Invasion of Ixalan. This is a 4 defense battle for 1 and a green. When Invasion of Ixalan enters the battlefield, look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal a permanent card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So we now have artifacts, enchantments, we have planeswalkers, we have battles, and we have lands. It is a very, very, very easy for your deck to be made up almost entirely, if not entirely, of permanents. So the fact that this allows you to grab any permanent, off the top 5 cards of your deck, it's going to grab you probably whatever you want. In a deck where you're going to put this in, you're going to be able to draw, like, just about anything. At the very least, you're going to hit your next land drop. And, like, that's the floor. That's pretty solid. I'll take it. And then it flips. So it has 4 defense. In green, by the way, green and red are the 2 colors that are easily the most well-equipped for flipping battles. So that 4 defense is like, that's not an issue. You're going to flip this thing. And on the backside, you get the Belligerent Regisar, which is a 4/3 trampler. Whenever you cast a spell, it gains indestructible until end of turn. So if you're playing spells in your pre-combat main phase, which is generally not always the best move, but there are a lot of reasons to do that these days, because we have a lot of things triggering during combat, or we have planeswalkers that you can activate to give you some kind of benefit in combat. So casting, playing in your pre-combat main phase, it used to be like this thing that you never did because your creatures and your permanents generally needed to like stick around for a whole turn cycle anyway. So why give your opponent that information going into combat? And that's still true in many cases. But the reality is we're playing more and more in the pre-combat main phase these days. And so if you do, this just gets indestructible. So you just have a 4/3 indestructible that's going to be swinging in relatively early. It comes down on a 2-drop battle, and then it could reasonably flip on turn 3. So by turn 4 or 5, you're probably going to be swinging with this thing, and a 4/3 trampler, especially if you have other battles down that you do want to flip, this thing's going to be a problem for your opponent. It's not amazing. It's not the biggest, sexiest thing on the market, but my goodness, it is going to get the work done. This is one that I went up against in early access, and there was one deck where somebody pulled off 2 of these, and I just kind of, it was one of those where I just sat back and just looked at it, because the one flipped the other was the thing. These can snowball really well. You know, so they got one flipped, and then they attacked the next one with their, with the Regisar, and it's just like, well, now what am I supposed to do? Do I block this thing that's indestructible just to prevent another one from entering the battlefield? Like, it's shockingly difficult to deal with. And it also makes combat tricks that much better because it's whenever you cast any spell. So if I have like a lightning strike or something in my hand, I can target this and you can cast whatever instant speed flash spell you have, and it's going to counter my lightning strike no matter what. Like, I think that's great. I think the backside is just, it's the workhorse, man. This thing will just get the job done once it flips. When it is on the battlefield, your opponent has to answer it. And that's really, like, that is the mark of a good card, if your opponent has to answer it. Granted, there are a lot of edict effects out there. There are a lot of toughness reduction effects out there that get around indestructible. So it's not the end of the world. But if you're trying to tangle in combat, this thing is going to be a real threat that your opponent has to answer. And the front phase is just, it's a commune with nature kind of effect, or commune with dinosaurs, or commune with spirit kind of effect. And it costs 2 rather than 1, which what those effects often do. But it also allows you to grab any permanent. I just think this is, again, very similar to the Invasion of Urgamon that we started this whole thing off with. It's just a good utility spell. That's really the bottom line. It's going to smooth out the rest of your game plan, and it's a threat that your opponent is going to have to keep an eye on. Now, you have other threats in your deck, right? You have to. This isn't a build around. I wouldn't suggest, starting with 4 of these and then just like, building from there. You have to have kind of a plan for what you're going to do with this. Some instant speed reaction, some flash stuff is probably going to be beneficial. Ways to maybe instant speed remove counters from things, which there aren't too many of those, to be fair, but I don't know, that kind of effect. And I don't know, you can do good things with this. You can do a lot of good things, but it's very straightforward. It's very simple, but more importantly, it's very inexpensive. It's very efficient. You'll notice, with the exception of the black one today, all of the ones we looked at were very inexpensive. They're primarily 2 and 3 drops, but yeah, Fiora was the exception at 6, but otherwise, we're looking at 2 and 3 drops, and I stand by that. I think the efficiency of getting a battle online and getting some value is where it needs to start. If you can't get the battle online, get it started, have some kind of impact on the board, and and then go from there. If you can't do that, I'm not anticipating the battle being particularly good. And there are a handful of them that are really rough because like the flip is not great. And the ETB is just not worth the squeeze. But the ones that we looked at today, they all are. They're very efficient, or they have a devastating effect. In the case of Fiora, a board wipe is usually worth 6 mana. Like, we don't always pay 6 mana for them, but if you have to, you will, and it'll be okay. Because a lot of the time that's the difference between winning or losing on the next turn. So if I had to bite the bullet and pay 6 for this, I will. And really hope my opponent doesn't have an Invasion of Gobakon flipped on their side. In any event, thank you so much for checking out the video. I appreciate it very, very much. Or the podcast, wherever you are listening to this. This has been another edition of the Overthinking MTG podcast, available anywhere podcasts are sold, as well as on YouTube if you want to actually see me in real time. And I know my shirt is, I'm rocking a Jurassic Park t-shirt right now for those of you listening on the audio, and the yellow outline is being picked up on my green screen, and so I know it looks like I have this very awkwardly shaped hole through my chest as I've been going this entire video. Yes, I'm aware it's kind of silly, but you know what? I looked at it before I started filming and was like, I think it's fun. I'm just gonna roll with it. So thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed. And yeah, stay tuned for more videos like this and more individual card deep dives. I have some other thoughts on some other battles, and so stay tuned for those. All right. Well, have a great day, great evening, great weekend, whatever it is when you're checking this out, and I will catch you on the next one.